Welcome to Chapter 5 of Law in Australian Society, which is all about justice. In this chapter you'll learn about different meanings of justice, the importance of due process, alternative forms of justice like therapeutic jurisprudence, difficulties in accessing justice, and the role of government in delivering justice in Australia. There's no single definition of justice, but it is associated broadly with ideas about fairness. So one way to start thinking about it is to think about different types of responses when some harm is done. So retribution is a kind of basic form of justice, which is all about punishing somebody for something that they did that was wrong. Compensation is about providing money to people to compensate for some harm that was done. And rehabilitation is about making sure that offenders don't offend again. So there are all these different kinds of responses that courts can deliver, which are all about achieving justice just in different ways. Another important distinction is between procedural justice and substantive justice. So procedural justice is all about ensuring that processes are fair, and substantive justice refers more to outcomes, so whether outcomes and opportunities in society are fair. And in this sense, we often talk about social or distributive justice. So social justice means that outcomes and opportunities should be distributed fairly across society, and that government should take action to remedy existing inequalities. Due process is a core idea associated with justice. Due process refers to the requirement that cases be heard in an impartial court according to the rules of evidence. This includes notice, being the idea that people should hear the case against them and see the evidence. It also includes publicity or open court procedures, meaning that everyone can observe the justice system in practice. And then there are many protections during court procedures. So there are rules of evidence, which says what kinds of information or evidence can be put before the court. There are standards of proof, being proof beyond a reasonable doubt for criminal trials, or the balance of probabilities for civil cases. And cases must be overseen by impartial judges. This is all designed to increase consistency, fairness, and transparency. The chapter also considers several alternative forms of justice. Now, these aren't always alternatives in the sense that it's a choice between this or that, but they are very different to forms of justice like retribution, which is just about punishing people. So therapeutic jurisprudence refers to court processes that aim to address the underlying causes of crime by promoting the well-being of offenders and victims. And you might be wondering why a court would want to help the well-being of an offender, but a lot of this has to do with recidivism rates and the idea that offenders re-offend over time. So the more that you can help offenders not to offend in the future, the more crime will be prevented and the more victims that will be protected. Restorative justice has some similar ideas but is a bit different. It refers to alternative means of resolving disputes, usually through mediation or conferencing, and the idea there is to help repair the harm that was done. So this can involve recognising victims' interests. Indigenous courts and circle sentencing rely on aspects of therapeutic jurisprudence and restorative justice, though they do rely on their own ideas and are partly designed to reduce Indigenous imprisonment rates. And finally, justice reinvestment refers to strategies that redirect funds from prisons, which we know are not effective in preventing crime over the longer term, towards community-based strategies for preventing crime. And there's some early evidence that suggests that justice reinvestment can be really effective. A major problem with achieving justice in Australian society is the high cost of seeking legal advice, so access to justice is really difficult. This remains a significant challenge for many Australians. Legal aid and community legal centres provide important free legal services to people who can't afford their own lawyer to improve access to justice. However, the resources for these services remains quite limited. So because of this, government plays a really important role in helping to achieve justice in society. So parliaments we've looked at in the earlier chapters, they enact laws that shape many aspects of justice, including sentencing procedures. Governments provide funding for health and education, employment, welfare, and a whole range of other services which can help to achieve justice in society by redistributing opportunities and outcomes. Australia overall is a relatively fair society, but there are many different groups that experience ongoing disadvantage, including Indigenous Australians, members of sexual minorities, and other groups, including people who are homeless and people with a disability. So the key points from this chapter are that justice is a very complex concept. There are many distinctions and many different ways of thinking about justice and how it can be achieved. Due process is one core aspect of justice. It requires that a person knows the case against them and has their case heard in an impartial court according to the rules of evidence. Because of the high cost of accessing legal services, accessing the justice system remains a significant challenge. And Australia is a relatively fair society, but many groups face significant and ongoing disadvantage. Some discussion questions for your lectures and tutorials. If a person harmed you or your family, what type of justice would you want? Would you seek retribution, or would you like the offender to be rehabilitated so they don't offend again? What are some different ways of achieving justice in Australian society? Why is there a need to repair harms and rehabilitate offenders rather than simply punishing them? What are the principles and requirements of due process? Which groups in Australian society do you think experience the most disadvantage, and how might these be remedied? And is Australia a fair and just society compared to others around the world?